So the FCC does not directly regulate social media. Under current law, that's not something we do. But I do think that, especially as social media occupies a large and growing share of our public discourse, that it's generated a lot of controversy, and there are different vectors to it. I think one of them has been privacy, and another one has been just its effect on our public discourse, especially in November 2017, I gave a speech on social media at the Media Institute, appropriately enough. And one of the things I teased out was, is social media on net a good thing for society? And I was ambivalent at the time, in part because I am a frequent user of social media. I was the first FCC commissioner on Twitter, at Ajit FCC, if you care to follow me. And you'll see if you put my name into the search box, some of the commentary you get, which is not exactly well informed. It includes a number of new expletives that I seem to learn every day. But it's been useful for me in getting the message out and learning from reporters and scientists and others who I would never otherwise have a chance to meet, virtually speaking.
If the FCC doesn't deal with that, who does? Who does in the government?
I mean, generally speaking, the Federal Trade Commission does, to the extent that something is an unfair or deceptive trade practice. But even there, its jurisdiction is unclear. And that's why I think Congress is talking about legislation in terms of transparency and privacy and accountability and what responsibility they have for policing content that goes over those platforms. I do think there's something to this, though, and I know I sound like a curmudgeon to some when I say it, but I do think there's a coarsening of this country when I think about the effect that social media has had. And if you look at Twitter, any of these platforms, the way we talk to each other is terrible now. It's getting worse, in part, I think, because of the distance, and in part because of the anonymity. And those are the two factors identified in November 2017. And I don't know how that changes, but I have to think it's going to continue to get worse, because it sounds silly to say, but I do think there's increasing amounts of research to back this up, that there's something to having a face-to-face conversation between two people who disagree with each other that ultimately makes consensus more likely. But when you're disintermediated, and especially when you're anonymous, the sky's the limit. There is no limit to what you can say. And now you see the blue check marks in the parlance of Twitter saying things that they would never say in person. I mean, I've had people come up to me in person after hearing me speak. Wow, you're really nice. I'm sorry I said all that stuff on Twitter. Members of Congress have said this stuff. And like, what did you think? You know, like, I have horns, I breathe fire, and I'm the guy who destroyed the internet, and screw your mug, and all this kind of nonsense. And but they would never say this in person. I do think that, look, social media is great, the internet is great in so many ways, but I do think that there's a significant downside, and especially when we're talking about the newer generation, not to go on too much of a digression, but if any of you saw the movie 13, think about the world that as it's going to be when kids who are that age, without having to have these face-to-face interactions that allow them to understand conflict and conflict resolution and stress and relationships, when they become adults, and when you have an entirely disintermediated populace that doesn't know how to relate to each other in person, how do we function as a body politic? I don't know, and I'm very worried, to be candid with you, about where we go from here.